Stop it. Stop it. I hate you.
Stop. You ruined my date, bitch. You ruined my date.
Hey guys, so this week we saw the release of the independent movie In Your Eyes, which was executive produced and written by Joss Whedon and directed by Brin Hill, and it was released for rent on Vimeo earlier this week.
Yeah, he premiered it at Tribeca, and immediately following the screening, there was a video of dopey Joss Whedon that came up, probably on the set of Avengers 2, being
Hey
like,
guys, it's Joss.
He released it on Vimeo immediately after the screening, which I think is really cool. I mean, he's always been at the forefront of experimenting with distribution systems for movies that aren't the $300 million big blockbuster. With Dr. Horrible, back then when he did that, he financed that himself and he released it on iTunes. Later with Much Ado About Nothing, he released that in limited theaters, but it was also available in different places online. And now with Vimeo, which Vimeo On Demand has been around for a little while, but nobody's kind of noticed.
Right.
And
this is the highest profile thing that they've done.
Yeah,
for sure.
this will hopefully maybe sort of kickstart Vimeo On Demand.
It's up on Vimeo for rent for $5. $5 is all it takes. But it's really cool seeing this sort of shortcut around the studio system for independent filmmakers to get their stuff out there.
And there's been a lot of people that have kind of been on this idea, right? That they're just kind of complaining about the fact that the studios aren't making this movie anymore, and that this whole like internet online independent distribution system is just a huge turd.
But it's literally just the only way that an independent filmmaker is going to get anything done, because the studio system has now evolved into only doing these $200-300 million movies that they make $1 billion off of, instead of making 30 movies that they make $600 million off of.
It makes more sense on a business level, and I understand why they're doing it, but I also think that this model allows for genuine independent filmmaking. $1 million for a studio is like pennies to the rest of us, but if they put $1 million into something, they're still going to stick their hands in it, and they're still going to dictate the artistry that's happening. You have to be a really, really big name for that not to happen, and even then, it's a really complicated political system. Even back in the 90s, when the mumblecore movement started, and the Duplass brothers,
Puffy Chair
and Puffy Chair, and all of those guys were doing their thing, technology became available for them to make these small movies by themselves, and the festivals gave them an outlet in order to sort of get their movies out there to the public, but you still had to like be in the know and listen to news about independent movies, and then go to Blockbuster and maybe find it like on the bottom shelf.
For the rest of us that like didn't regularly go to film festivals, it's still really tough to see these movies.
But now, like, we have things like Indie Game the Movie, where those guys raised that money to make that documentary on their own, and they're selling it direct to consumer through VHX, and now you can stream it on Netflix and other things, but you can just buy it directly from them, and they get 90% to 80 to 90% of the profits, as opposed to that profit going back to the studio. I would have been really mad if I had gone to a movie theater and paid $15 for In Your Eyes because I love Joss Whedon, and come out with the movie that came out without spoiling anything.
The quality of the film, the texture of it, the feel of it felt very indie. It very clearly didn't belong in a theater, just on like the quality of the image level. But it did feel at home on my laptop when I was at home.
And that's not to say that it wasn't a competently made movie.
Right.
It was a very well made movie, insofar as that in a second when we start talking about it, I think the issues that we had with it are sort of nitpicky plot, personal issues in terms of the structure and the story, but in terms of the actual filmmaking of it, it was well made, it was well performed.
It was a proper film, it really was. Now, having said all that, we love the idea behind everything. Conceptually, we love where it's at. Go pay $5, go watch it, support the cause.
Link in the description.
Because we all need to do it. If you're going to watch it right now, go ahead and pause this, go pay your $5, watch it. About 90 minutes later, come back, watch the rest of this, and talk about it all in the comments if you don't want any spoilers.
One of the coolest things about this movie is that because he released it before the press screening even happened, for yesterday and this morning, maybe not now, so don't Google too much, but for like there was like this 24-hour window where you could watch this movie and not know anything about it.
Which is impossible to do.
So don't let us ruin it for you. Go, watch the movie, come back, this minute mark right now, and we'll talk about it, and then you can join us in the comments to talk about it.
Open a new tab, it's easy. So, In Your Eyes is about these two people that are connected. There's a power that sort of connects them, and they literally see through each other's eyes at different moments throughout their life.
They're sort of sensorily connected.
Yeah.
They can see through each other's eyes. They can hear each other when they speak directly to each other.
Out loud. They can't read each other's thoughts.
Right, they can't read each other's thoughts. There was a room, and I was like, Clint!
Hey!
We could hear each other, right? They can feel each other's physical sensations when they're really, really, really strong.
Yeah.
So like when you get punched in the face.
They're just really intrinsically like connected, and they don't realize it until a moment sort of at the end of the first act of the film. For me, it's such an interesting sort of sci-fi concept, kind of a Twilight Zone-y concept. Like suddenly you realize that you're connected with another human being and you can see through their eyes and hear them talking even though you're thousands of miles apart. And like, what does that do to you? Like as a person. And so for me, they took kind of a romantic comedy angle for it, because there's like hijinks that happens. Like she ruins a date that he's on. It goes CW really quick, and that's sort of where I kind of checked out of it. It didn't need to go like super dark, like one of them needs to be a serial killer or a psycho or anything like that. But I wanted a little more sort of grittiness out of like, no, really, like what would happen?
It definitely felt like it lacked a little bit of genuineness.
Yeah.
That like this isn't. It wasn't set in like a universe where this is reality and then it happened to these people in the real world and they don't know how to explain it and then they're dealing with the consequences. It's just about their relationship and watching their relationship build. And so it's definitely more Twilight than Twilight Zone. And it's about like ignoring the circumstances that you're in that might hold back that relationship. But this isn't reality, right? This is romantic fantasy, and they will live happily ever after in Canada or up in Greenland or something.
Probably Greenland.
And they'll be fine, and they'll be and they'll be able to touch each other at the same while they're touching themselves and touching everything else.
That's what weirded me out. The very first thing that I thought was like, what happens when they
and they do. They sensually fuck. They co-masturbate.
They have phone sex via their connection.
Yes,
like
they have mental phone
and,
sex.
like,
but what happens when you mix that with actually having sex?
Being there? Like it would be like banging a mirror, as far as I could tell, or like somebody in a me
or
suit.
it would be like it'd be the double mint twin version of awesome.
I guess.
Right? So yes, I do think that there's a gigantic suspension of disbelief that has to happen, and I think that if you you have to avoid the like Joss Whedon-esque expectation of it being a grand sci-fi movie, because it's a cheap, small, super contained, tiny romance.
And I didn't need it to be a great big sci-fi movie. In fact, there's a little bit of a car chase at the end, and I was like, don't do that. That's not like, it doesn't even need to be that big. It had this great sci-fi idea at its very core, and I felt like it got sort of ignored because of the romanticness.
It tried to be bigger than it was at points. It was clunky. It was a little bit amateurish.
It was an independent movie.
It was.
But again, it was an independent movie in a very cool spot, in a very cool time, where independent movies should be easier to get to, easier to watch, easier to distribute.
Yeah, and if you know what
really cool,
and if you know what you're jumping into. If you know what you're jumping into, I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah. So, if you did pause in the middle somewhere and now you've come back, welcome back. And let us know what you think about In Your Eyes down in the comments below. Come back next time for more movie news on CineFix Now. Hey. Hey, Cruz, you in the other room?
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey.